Most business owners think they've been really smart by keeping their marketing spend really low. But what if that mindset is exactly what's keeping them small? In this video, I'm going to show you why spending more to get a customer, a lot more, when you do it right, is not only less risky, it's one of the smartest moves that you could make. And if you're ready to stop thinking like a small business owner and start thinking like a proper professional millionaire business owner, well then stay tuned because you're going to love this video. The business we're going to talk about works in the travel sector, and it's run by a guy who he's been in the business for 20 years. On the face of it, he's quite ambitious, but his kind of words and actions differ. And when I got talking to him, what became very, very apparent is that his focus was all about protecting what I have rather than grow to what I want. Does that make sense? I sat him down and we started to drill down into his numbers. So Ian's average customer brings in, on average, £20,000 of gross margin per year. So let's write that down, all right? £20,000 of what we call gross margin. So that's the money available to cover the overheads in the business and contribute towards the profit. So I said to Ian, I said, well, that's all very well and good. I said, fantastic, great starting point. How long do these customers stay with you on average? And he says, well, to be honest, I said, I don't lose that many. I said, we've got to put some numbers on it, Ian. He said, well, probably then, he said, if I'm being very conservative, they stay at least 3 to 5 years. Well, that's fantastic. I said, so you're telling me then that your average customer is worth somewhere between 60,000, 3 times 20,000, and £100,000 lifetime value. He said, yeah, I guess I am. I said, if I had one of those ideal customers in the room next door right now, it's not a lead or a prospect, this guy is absolutely good to go. He is hot to trot, Ian, I said. What would you pay me to bring him into the room? So Ian had a good little think about it. He said, oh, it's difficult. I said, I understand it's difficult, Ian, but we've got to make decisions. That's what business is all about. I said, would you pay £1 for me to bring that customer? He said, I'd definitely pay £1. I thought, fantastic. I said, would you pay £50,000? Ian looked a little bit squeamish. He said, probably not. I said, you know, Ian, I think on balance, you're probably right. But we've now got our two bookends, Ian, because we know you'd spend £1 quite willingly, £1, and we know you wouldn't spend £50,000. So the right answer, Ian, is somewhere between the two. He said, okay, I hear what you're saying. So we talked around it for a little while, and where we got to, this is customers on average are bringing in £20,000 of gross margin per year, and they're staying for multiple years. So where we got Ian to is that he would be very comfortable spending £10,000 to get a new average customer. And the minute you get to that point, that's quite a large number because it's, the spend's pretty good in his business. But the minute you get to that realization, the whole game starts to change. Now I recognize that there's a cash flow impact here. But here's what else you need to know about Ian's business. Because you see, as I said earlier, Ian's business is already making profit. His overheads are already covered from his existing customers. So all the gross margin from his new customers will go straight through to the bottom line. And if you're struggling to stay with me around my use of the words gross margin and things here and overheads, etc., there's another video in this channel which talks through the basic numbers of growing a business. But once you're beyond break even and making money, which Ian definitely is, every new customer that comes in, the gross profit, the gross margin from that customer flows straight to the bottom line. Ian's average customers are worth £20,000 a year on average. Even if he spends 10 to get that customer, he's got another 10,000 that's going to go straight to his bottom line. So of course he's going to open his mind to spending £10,000 to get a customer. And the minute you open your mind to doing that, it takes you to places that the small business owner never gets to visit, not even in their head, because their minds are closed, their eyes are blinkered to the opportunities that exist. When you've got £10,000 to spend, you can do a lot with that. Not suggesting Ian would do this, but we could send something out in the post to 10,000 people and hope one of them responds. Very unsophisticated, not going to work very, very well. We're not going to do that. Ian's going to get very focused because he knows a lot about his customers. He knows who they are, he can identify them, he can connect with them on LinkedIn, we can find their contact details, and he's going to start sending them stuff in the post, but interesting stuff that's going to get their attention. Because for £10,000, Ian could send 100 people something that cost him £100. Now, again, I'm not saying that's what he should do, but straight away, gosh, what could I send that's going to cost me £100 to get the attention of my ideal customer, to get me into a conversation with them so I might be able to convert them? Because if I send 100 out, I only need 2 or 3 to respond. So I have conversations and I need to convert 1 for my cost of sale to be £10,000. You see how this starts to work? So we started to sit down with Ian and we actually found some really creative stuff. It was actually quite fun. It involved remote control cars. It's a long story, but he actually ended up spending about £40, and he did send out 100 of these remote control parcels in a very eye-catching way with a very neat message that went along with it. And so he actually spent just over £4,000 plus a bit of postage. So just under, he had change from his £5,000 spend, and he actually ended up getting 3 new customers. Now, 3 customers from £5,000, he was spending about £1,700 to get a customer, way under the £10,000 that he'd allowed, but he only got to that by doing the thinking this big business approach to setting your marketing budgets allows you to do. Does that make sense? And this thinking is not done by most business owners, and so most business owners continue to persist with trying to get their customers for free or super cheaply, or I want to avoid spending as much money as I can on marketing, and as a consequence they protect what they have, but they don't grow to what they want. So this isn't about Ian's business per se. It's really about your mindset and how you are thinking about your marketing, because this changes everything when you stop asking yourself, how cheaply can we do this? And you start focusing on the question, much better question, what's the best way for us to reliably acquire the right amount of our ideal customers, to get that rhythmic acquisition, that consistent, predictable flow of customers coming into our business. It's only a game to begin with. Think of it that way. I'm not asking you to start spending the money. Just come with me mentally and play this game. What would be the best way for you to reliably acquire the ideal customers you want in the right volume at the right flow? Because it changes everything when you start to understand that. You don't actually have to do it until you've at least understood it. Most people don't go there, they don't think this way. But once you do understand it, you can start making strategic moves to position your business so that you attract exactly the right of people you want. You can start to show up like no one else does in your sector or your industry, because you understand the numbers behind the marketing. And in every business sector, every industry out there, what I promise you is true, is that the business that can profitably spend the most money to get customers, that is the business that wins every single time. Because we can buy the awareness, we can buy the share of voice, we can get people's attention. Like I say, with the remote control cars, these were not small cars, they were in a big box that turned up there. Impossible to ignore for Ian's ideal customers. As a consequence, of the 100 that he sent out, a dozen or more came back to him wanting to have conversations, and from those he signs up multiple customers because he's thinking the right way. This game that we're playing allows you to test and invest in what works. You don't have to punt on 100 remote control cars. What we did with Ian, first of all, is we bought 10. His punt to begin with was like 400 quid. We went 10 remote control cars and we packaged them up, but we got response. So then we went to 50 and then the final 40, and the 100 were sent overall. But the risks were diminishing at every step and every stage. We were able to take these steps because we'd done the thinking. And most people in your industry, in your sector, are not doing the thinking. And when you start to do the thinking, properly, like professional marketers, as a professional business owner, starts to liberate the options that you consider. What you can do, how you might be able to make it happen, and you'll be staggered at the impact it starts to have, and the results come really, really quickly once you start to do this properly. So what should you do next? Let me break it down for you, because really there's 5 steps here. The first step, you saw where we started with Ian, you have to calculate your average customer value. You need to get that number right, and obviously the number you're working out here ideally is your gross margin. So you would take out the absolute cost of the goods that you're selling or the service, so you're left with the margin. That's the key number here. Don't fall into the trap of working out your turnover and ignore the margin, because every business has costs to incur. So what was our turnover in the last 12 months? How many customers did we serve? And what was our overall gross margin as per our accounts? Crunch those 3 things together and we'll get an average customer value on a yearly basis for margin. You then do have to form a little bit of a view, as Ian did, on how long these customers stay. Don't be too cautious, but Ian went to 3 to 5. In truth, it's probably nearer to 7 to 10 for him, but at least it gave him some leverage with 3 to 5. But accurately work out how long you're keeping those customers for, because that'll take your yearly value and you can then extrapolate it to get to a lifetime value. Second step then is to play the game that I played with Ian. So, well, how much would you be willing to spend to get a new customer? And think it's a customer, not a lead or an inquiry, to actually get the customer. And as I said with Ian, we started at £1, we'd definitely spend £1, we wouldn't spend 50 grand, and then we crunched it down and we got to this place where actually, he could see the logic, and sensibly spending 10 grand to get a customer would be fine for him. You need to do that work for you. Your numbers might be smaller than Ian's, not a problem, but we've got to understand what it is. And again, don't be too tight, don't be too cautious, don't get caught up trying to protect what you've got now. Stay focused instead on what it is that you want to build. Because the truth is, the larger the number in step 2, the more scope you will have to kind of do more damage in the market and bring more people into your business. Step 3 then is a bit of research in most businesses, especially if you are B2B. If you're B2B, the step 3 is really important. I want you to sit down and I want you to write down a list of the companies, the businesses that you would like to have as customers. Based on what you know about them, these are our dream customers. And I want you to get to at least 50 of them, and ideally 100. Bit harder to do if you're a B2C business. You're more likely to start looking demographically or at particular streets and places. But if you're B2B, building a dream list of your 50 or 100 ideal prospects is perfect for this, because it's going to liberate this marketing spend. Because then in step 4, what you're going to do is then work out, we're going to get as creative as we can, we're going to brainstorm stuff, we're going to work out what can we send these dream list people, the names of the people in the businesses, what can we send them that will be so impactful when it lands that it will be utterly compelling to them to at least have a conversation with us. It will be unreasonable for them not to want to talk to us. What could we actually send to them? And of course, you've been freed up now to think without the cost constraint. That's how we got to the remote control cars in Ian's case, for instance. And then we're going to do some testing. As I said, we're going to send 10 out, see if we can send 20 out, see if we can get a response. Had one B2B business sent the construction site Wellington boots, just like literally sent the boot with a stamp on, got a white Sharpie, the message was written on the boot, and he sent the boot in the post. Did he get lots of responses? You bet he did. But millions of pounds of the contracts, actually, genuinely. I mean, his contracts are all very big, but only sent like a couple of dozen of them out. He bought a dozen pairs, and he just split the pairs up and sent one Wellington boot. Worked brilliantly. Little squishy stress ball feet have worked great, getting foots in the door. Lumpy mail is what we call it, but stuff that stands out, needs to be thought through properly, but part of that thinking is doing the budget work properly, so you actually recognise that you are able to do this, that commercially it makes sense, and you understand what success has to look like. And then step 5, we're going to track what works. We're going to look at what we're spending, how much of it we've sent out, what responses we've had, and we're going to track what works, always driven by this kind of magnetic north that we've got, this polar north star, which is how much we can afford to spend to get a customer. And Ian's case, we spent 10 grand, we needed a customer. As it happened, we spent 5 grand, we got 3 or 4 customers. Worked like a dream. So tracking is the final step. And then once you've got stuff that works, well then, hey presto, we can start to scale it. We can build it into a process. We can start to rhythmically send this stuff out, rhythmic activity, so that we start to harvest the meetings and the conversations that bring the customers in. That's the rhythmic acquisition bit. And that's why it's so important that you think about your marketing budget in the way that professional business owners think about their marketing, in the way that bigger business owners think about their marketing. Because if you persist in thinking about your marketing budget in the way that all the little businesses do, well, you're going to stay little too. If this video has helped you to think differently about customer acquisition and your marketing budgets, you might want to check out the books that helped me to build 15 separate £1 million plus businesses. I walked through the ones that had the biggest impact and how I used them to help me to grow. Click here to watch that video now.